Welcome to episode 206 of the Sisters in Loss podcast. What happens when the heartbeat stops? What happens when the doctors say there is nothing we can do? Today's guests experienced 2 miscarriages outside of the hospital, one at a rental car facility and the other at home. JaRonda Dockett has sickle cell anemia and was considered high risk because of the blood disease and being diagnosed with gestational diabetes, as well as bacterial vaginosis when she became pregnant. She went to take her rental car back to the facility and miscarried in their restroom. JaRonda takes us back and shares in this episode how she had to process her grief and learn her loss was a birth, finding out she was pregnant again and overcoming the trauma of her first loss, and miscarrying her second baby at home. She turns her pain into purpose by sharing her experiences in her book titled When the Heartbeat Stops. This episode is for you to listen to if you have sickle cell anemia, have been considered high risk, and want to learn and know what to do when the heartbeat stops. Here is JaRonda Dockett.
Welcome to the podcast, JaRonda.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. So would you please introduce yourself to our listeners, share a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure can. So my name is JaRonda Dockett. I currently reside in Maryland, but I'm from Pennsylvania. I work as an educator. I teach first graders, and I've been doing teaching for about 15 years now. I've been married now for 2.5 years to my husband, Vince. And pretty quickly after we got married, that's where my whole journey and exposure to the world of pregnancy loss and infertility kind of begins.
Yeah, so take us on that journey through your journey to parenthood and motherhood. Share with us your loss story.
Sure. So my husband and I got married in July of 2018. And we had said from the beginning, Vince and I, that we didn't really want to put ourselves on a timeline. We weren't going to do anything to stop us from having children, but we also weren't planning. We didn't have any ovulation calendars. We weren't tracking anything. We were just kind of like, we'll see what happens. So a couple months later, in September, I started having some abdominal pain, and it was more than my usual, pain from cramps. And so, I began to get concerned about it. And I went to the urgent care and found out that I had bacterial vaginosis, which was causing the cramping. But then in the same breath, found out that I was also expecting. So again, Vince and I were not trying to conceive, but we were over the moon excited about being pregnant. But unfortunately, because I found out that I was pregnant in the midst of having this abdominal pain, I was also immediately worried. I was wondering why this bacterial vaginosis happened. I hadn't had it before. I had UTIs before, but not this. I didn't know if it was connected to my pregnancy in any way. I was not sure if the pain was going to affect the baby. So right from the jump, during this experience where I felt that I should have been super elated, I was in the middle of feeling happy, but also worried at the same time. And unfortunately, that is a feeling that I felt throughout most of my first pregnancy. I would say then the next couple weeks were probably similar to most people who are pregnant for the first time. You start researching stuff on Google. You start asking your other friends or family members about recommendations for things. And for the few people who we did tell that I was communicating about with, They were very excited. We were, really eager to welcome this baby into the world. Then I would say the first ultrasound picture happened, and my husband was over the moon when he saw the ultrasound pic, and immediately wanted to tell everybody. And I was feeling a little bit more reserved about it because, as I said, I was concerned from the pain that started out the pregnancy, and just kind of that feeling of, well, something just doesn't seem right, never really went away. And little did I know that he was carrying around the sonogram. He carried the picture with him and even took it to a trip that we took to New York. So I was about 10 weeks and we went to go visit his friend in New York. And when we got there, he immediately broke out the sonogram to break the news. He started to tell his best friend about us expecting, and, was super excited. His girlfriend that was there was also excited. And I just kind of felt underwhelmed compared to everybody else, and even started to feel guilty about that. Why is it easy for everyone else to be so excited about this news, and I can't produce this same level of energy and excitement that they have? And part of that was because I was not feeling good. The whole car ride up there, I felt like each pothole and bump was causing discomfort. And I hadn't felt that way before we had got in the car. So I was like, well, maybe it's just the road trip. The road trip is too long. But as the visit continued, those feelings did not go away. The discomfort, the slight cramping. And so when we got back from the trip, I immediately wanted to see my care provider. My regular OBGYN wasn't available, so I ended up seeing someone else because they were available that day, and I really wanted to get in quickly. And the OBGYN checked my cervix. She said it's closed. She said everything looks good. And, basically told me, some level of cramping is normal during pregnancy. So I was relieved to hear that. I was like, okay, well, she says, the cervix is closed and everything is good. And, went home, got some sleep, and woke up the next day to a lot of snow falling from the sky when it was time to go to work. And so because there was so much snow, there were not very many students in my class. And I realized that the pain was intensifying when I found myself on the floor, curled up in the fetal position in my classroom. And another teacher had come in and basically told me, go home. So I was like, yes, I that's probably a good idea. I was trying to stick it out and, but then thought, maybe rest is the best thing for me. Just got back from this trip, maybe being pregnant, I just need more time. So I had still had the rental car that we used to go to New York. So since I was leaving school early, I said I can stop at the rental car facility and return the car. And then I can just take an Uber home and, be able to get some really good rest in. So I returned the car. And right after I returned the car, I, got on my phone to request the Uber and was like, oh, let me go to the bathroom before I get in the Uber. So I went to the bathroom, came out to wait for the Uber, and the rental car company was at the bottom of like this car dealership. So the bathroom is at the top in the car dealership. So I'm standing there waiting for the Uber, and all of a sudden I get a feeling like I peed myself. But I was like, I just went to the bathroom, so I know I didn't pee myself. And I look down and I see these like brown spots on the floor under me on this like shiny white car dealership floor. And I just start saying out loud, like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And one of the guys who works at the car dealership is like walking toward me and is like, are you okay? Is everything okay, ma'am? And I'm like, no, I think I'm losing my baby. And then I run away to go back into the bathroom. And the women's bathroom was full. It was only a 1-stall bathroom. So I rushed into the men's bathroom. And, you know, as soon as I sat down, I kind of felt everything rushing out of me. And it was so fast and so quick. I couldn't even process everything that was happening, but I knew that, you know, this was the end of this pregnancy, and that, you know, my baby was likely now somewhere inside of this toilet bowl. And I did not really have time to think about it or think like, what should I do, or really look and examine the toilet or take a picture or do anything. And because my app on my phone was like blowing up, because the Uber driver was like, you know, like, I'm here, let's go. And, you know, basically I end up taking the Uber into the urgent care instead. And in the car, had to make one of the hardest phone calls I've had to make, and call my husband and tell him that, you know, I'm pretty sure that I lost the baby, and, you know, please come meet me at the urgent care. You know, the urgent care treatment, they, you know, were very kind and did the, you know, ultrasound to confirm everything. But in the midst of doing that, the technician was like trying to talk to me about fibroids. And I was like, what do you mean I don't have fibroids? I knew about fibroids because my sister had them, my cousin, my mom, my aunt. Like, I know a lot of people, friends who had fibroids. And I had not had them, hadn't had, you know, heavy cycles or anything. So, you know, in the midst of me trying to process that my baby is gone, you know, she's trying to talk to me about this, you know, other health issue. And I'm like, no, like, I don't have that. That's not me. And she's like, yeah, you have 3 really big ones. I can feel them here and here and here. You know, and so I just kind of had to like push that to the side, because I, again, in trying to process that I just lost my child. So my friend comes to the urgent care to pick up my husband. I end up driving us home, and the first days are so hard. A lot of days are hard after loss. And it was really the first time that I had a grief that was so close to me. I have lost people that I am close with, but typically they have been older. And so I guess kind of in my mind, I, you know, rationalize it like, you know, they have spent their life here on earth, and, you know, God called them home, and that's okay. But this is the first time where I really had to process grief for myself. And I did not know what to do. There is not, you know, a course you have to take in high school or college that prepares you for a moment like this. There's, you know, not much talk in my family about, you know, what to do when somebody dies, or how to grieve, or and so it was very hard to figure out how to grieve myself, how to grieve collectively with my husband, how to understand how his process of losing our child might be different than mine. His way of grieving is going to be different. And, accepting that as valid and being able to move forward together. Miscarriages and pregnancy losses can definitely separate couples and create voids in their union. And I feel very fortunate that losing Faith, that's what we named our daughter, was something that brought Vince and I together. But I know that that's not everybody's story. So I would say probably like a week later, I was up at night and I couldn't sleep, was crying. And I went to the computer and I just started typing out everything that had happened. So, basically the story that I'm sharing here, I started writing it down. And I looked at it with fresh eyes the next day and, thought like, wow, it actually sounds like a story. And I sent it to a couple friends who I knew would be, brutally honest with me and, just asked them, would you want to keep reading? Because I hadn't finished the story. I had basically wrote until I could be sleepy enough to get in the bed and actually go to sleep and not just stare at the ceiling and cry. So they said that, yes, they would keep reading. And so I kept writing and I finished my story and started praying about if the story should become a book, and basically sent out a fleece prayer to God. Like, if you want me to write this book, then I need you to have somebody talk to me this week about book writing, about writing a book. And a couple of days later, one of my colleagues started talking to me about writing a book. And, I was just like, oh, okay, well, you answered the prayer pretty fast, Lord. And I did not think you were going to say yes. So I had not written a book before. When I was in school, I, wrote a couple poems and things, and, the writing that I've done for academics. But this was very different kind of writing, very personal. And I wanted it to be that way. I wanted it to be very raw. I wanted it to really describe the experience of what miscarriage and loss was like for me. And then I wanted to also be able to share other people's stories of what it was like for them. When, at least I, thought about getting pregnant, I didn't know the risk about miscarriage. I didn't know that it was something that happened to almost 1 in 4 women. And I was shocked to hear how common it was and how little it was, in my opinion, talked about. And after I started talking to people about my miscarriage and, shared a couple Facebook posts, people would, comment or DM me and text me and say, me too. And these were women that I've had in my circle all this time. And it just hurt me that I didn't know how deeply they were hurting and how they didn't feel that they could share such an important and personal loss with anyone. And I wanted to provide that for women. So I started connecting with people and asking them, would you be willing to share your story? And, women talk to me basically just like I'm talking to you all today. And I just started writing their story down and kind of formatted to tell it from a first person point of view, so that each woman in what became my book, When the Heartbeat Stops, each woman is personally speaking to you and telling you what happened to them, what happened to their family, what happened to their baby, how their doctor's experiences were, how they were treated, how they grieved afterwards. And I think there's a real power in that, in spreading women's voices, and also being able to see that even if what happened with your loss or your miscarriage wasn't the same as mine, there's some woman out there who connects to your story and with such specificity connects to your story. And to be able to, have people say that to me, like, wow, that exact thing happened to me, lets people know they're not alone and builds community. And I feel like, especially after pregnancy loss, community is so important to move forward in the grieving process and to not feel stuck. Some days you will feel stuck. And it's definitely during those days where I feel being in community and for me, staying grounded in faith has really helped me to keep going. I suffered another loss in January of this year, 2021. My second loss with our son, Justin. I was farther along with Justin, around 15 weeks. And I think for us, that made it even a little bit more difficult because the quote unquote message, I would say, that you often hear about miscarriage is that, once you make it out the first trimester. And so, once we passed the first trimester, we had a double layer of hope, I would say, that like, oh, this pregnancy is going to be different. Like, we're going to bring home a baby this time. And that's not what happened. So it was really difficult to then, be 5 or 6 weeks farther along and have the loss happen again. Since that loss, my husband and I decided that it would probably be best for me to have my fibroids removed. We had contemplated it after the first loss, but I really wanted to try again. The thing that is, I think, most difficult with miscarriage and pregnancy loss is that a lot of times there's not one thing that somebody can point to and say, that was the cause, that was the reason. And for somebody like me who is like super data focused and type A, like not having that makes the loss that much harder. And so, they could hypothesize that maybe the fibroids contributed to my first loss, but they couldn't really say for sure. And, there are women who have delivered healthy babies who have been pregnant with fibroids. So, I really didn't want to be cut open. And I was like, let's just try again. So after we lost Justin, we made an appointment to have surgery. Because of the pandemic, it got pushed back. And I ended up having surgery in July of 2020. Sorry, not 2021 when I had my loss. In January 2020, I had my loss. And then in July of 2020, I had my surgery. And the myomectomy went really great. I had a team of surgeons and support staff and the anesthesiologists. They were all Black women looking at me and supporting me. And I felt really great going into the surgery, even though I was still nervous because I had never had surgery before and never been put to sleep. But the recovery was good. went as well as could be expected. And so now we are, in that space of trying to conceive again. And in this space, I think what's different for me this time is that I can advocate more for what I need to be able to have a pregnancy that includes support. Even though my OBGYN providers were very great, I have a lot of different factors: my age, sickle cell anemia, family history of diabetes, and those things, to me, after a loss, should have prompted a conversation about a maternal fetal medicine specialist, perinatologist, any kind of, support to really view this as a high-risk pregnancy where the medical advice and information could be talked about more in detail up front. And I didn't have that. So moving forward, that's something that's a priority for me. It's something that I know about now and can advocate for myself now. I also am in training with sisters-in-laws to become a doula. And so I know even more about how my body works, how I can use less medically invasive strategies during pregnancy, labor, and birth, and can advocate for myself to have a doula of my own. So we remain hopeful, my husband and I, for our rainbow baby, and just continue to do the work of having conversations about miscarriage and pregnancy loss so that this is not a taboo topic when it is something that so many women face.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your whole story and journey up until now. I would love for you to fill in a couple gaps for us. Obviously, the pain that you felt going through your first loss, at a car dealership and then having to go to the urgent care. After that, did you go right back to work the next day or did you take some time off?
I definitely took time off. I did take time off. I did not go back the next day. I think I took about a week off after my first loss. After my second loss, I think I took 2 days. And maybe there was a weekend that happened to also be in there, but I went back to work much faster. And that was really hard because, one, I had told my class already that I was expecting, and I did not tell my previous class of students about it. And so that made it very hard to have a conversation with 6 and 7-year-olds about loss and that Miss Dockett isn't having a baby anymore. And even, some of the kids in my class cried when I told them. Some of them laughed when I told them. Some of them did nothing and they didn't really understand. And one of my student siblings just randomly saw me in the hall like 2 days later. And she was like, "That's my sister's teacher whose baby died in her stomach." And it totally took me off guard. Like, I was not ready for a 4-year-old to say that comment. And I think that comment just kept replaying in my head because the next day when I woke up, I was just sad, like just sad. And I got in the car to go to work, and I was crying, and my husband was there, and Vince was telling me, like, you don't have to go to work. You can stay home. And, I was like, no, I don't want to stay home. If I stay home, I'm just going to keep thinking about him. Like, I just might as well go to work. And, I pushed myself to go to work. And when I got to the parking lot of my school, I was still crying. And it's like a 40-minute drive to my job. And, two of the teachers kind of saw me in my car in the parking lot. They got in my car and they prayed with me. And one of them drove me back home. And they basically told me, you are not going to work today. And I think that is, for me, again, one of the important parts of having your community and having your village who can help you take care of yourself. And when you don't even feel like taking care of yourself, when it seems like nothing matters, they can be there for you.
Yeah, that's the reason why I asked you that, because I was like, I don't know if I would have it in me to want to go back to school, to be around other kids and teach kids. For you to share that, and, the share that you did tell your class and then had to break the news to them in, a simple manner for 7-year-olds to understand. I truly understand. And I'm so happy that you have that village and that support system in your school system with friends and other fellow teachers that really understand that you just weren't there. You just needed your time. Needed your time.
For sure.
You needed your time to do so and take your time away. So I'm happy that you were doing that. There's been so much controversy now. Well, now I would say controversy, but obviously there's a lot of legislation going on right now around making sure women who have had losses get some form of paid leave, whether it's 1 week or 2 weeks is what they're debating right now. So I wanted to make sure I asked that, because I think that going back to work, no matter your gestation with any loss, is so difficult. And I wanted to make sure that you shared a little bit about how your return to work is, especially since you're a school teacher.
Yes, I'm excited about that legislation, and, prayerfully that is passed and it goes through, and that the losses that, moms experience in those first and second trimesters, and, some even the third trimester, that, people would really see it as a loss and see it as, a loss, like when they have lost someone, and understand that we need time to grieve, just as they would when they take FMLA for a loss. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about your book. We kind of heard the inspiration about you just writing it down, putting your pen to your pad and journaling it and getting out all your thoughts, especially after your first loss. Talk to us about how all the other women came together to compile all the stories in your book.
Sure. The first people that I ended up reaching out to were people I was connected with from high school that actually just were open about their stories on Facebook, who had posted things before about their miscarriages and pregnancy losses. And, when I reached out to them, they had said, yes, this is something I'm interested in. I also have colleagues that are in the book, friends, church members. So there are a plethora of different stories, different ages of women. Most of the women in the story are also Black women sharing their stories of loss. And what really hit me as I was writing the book is how much I didn't know. And with each woman's story, I felt that there was some nugget to hold on to and some advocacy work to be done, something to fight for and let hospitals and legislators know that this is what women need. The most alarming thing to me was shared in Jen's story. And Jen had to schedule a stillbirth, basically, and, was scheduled to deliver her baby on the same floor as other women who were going to be taking their babies home. And, the way that she spoke about having to listen to babies crying all night when she was in the hospital, having to walk by the rooms of moms with their babies, having to see, people walking back and forth with their, car seats and other things to take their babies home was just heart-wrenching. That it would not be a practice to have a separate area for moms who are experiencing a pregnancy loss, especially in that situation where it's something that was scheduled. That just really was alarming to me and broke my heart to know that this is something that multiple women have gone through.
Yeah, and that's the most unfortunate part about this is that, a lot of hospitals, from hospital to hospital, whether they're private or public or a religious institution, that they do not have a protocol in place on what to do with clients and, birthing people who actually have already know that the baby is stillborn or, know that there is some form of, genetic abnormality that may result in a fetal demise once the baby is actually born. And they don't put them at the end of the hall or segregate them and put them on another floor, since it's labor and delivery. They just think it's labor and delivery. Yeah. And then the mother is re-traumatized every time she walks out the room. So you're talking about already trauma from losing a baby, grief and trauma from that. But then you're talking about the trauma of just being amongst all of these normal people who have these babies who are crying, who are up in the middle of the night. It's unfortunate. And that's really why, we're needed. It's really why we're needed as bereaved parents and who are advocating and activating, being activists. But it's also why I think doulas are needed. And I'm so happy that you are part of the Sisters-in-Laws doula community now, where you are learning all about all of the things that we're talking about and really how to go and make an impact in your community as a doula. So I would love for you to share a little bit about that. How has the course been for you so far? I mean, obviously, we're not that far into it for you, but how has the course been for you thus far?
The course has been great. It is a lot of information, which is great. It's just so much for me to take in and something that, because I'm so passionate about it and really committing to serving women to the best of my ability and serving birthing persons, I definitely can feel overwhelmed because I'm like, wait, what was that medical term for that? And wait, what is the position that we could do? So there's so much information and it's stuff that I can go back to again and again, which I'm grateful for, and be able to have and equip myself and others with this vital information. The biggest benefit, I would say, for me in being in the the doula class is really just the information and just how much information could be shared and needs to be shared with pregnant persons that most don't have access to or wouldn't be able to receive if not for doulas. So that to me is really priceless. Just being able to feel knowledgeable about what's going on with, my body, and then, also knowledgeable about things that can and should happen for moms and babies, and really just advocating for options and helping other women advocate for options to know that our bodies were created for this birthing experience, and that we are able to have whatever kind of birth experience that we want to have, and that our doctors and midwives and care providers are there to guide us for sure. But in the end, that, we are the ones who get to make the choices.
Absolutely. So what tools or resources that you have used that have helped you throughout your journey? I know you mentioned, obviously you got the myomectomy for your fibroids, but you also mentioned that you have sickle cell anemia, which is something that I would think raises a red flag to doctors automatically, especially when you get pregnant, that you would be automatically considered high risk just because of what that disease does to your blood, So what other tools or resources that you have used that you would think that would be beneficial to the listeners?
For me, before I get into the tools, I want to respond to what you said about sickle cell anemia, though. Right when I found out I was pregnant, that was one of the things that I asked, that I wanted to know more about, like, how is sickle cell, going to affect my pregnancy. I do have sickle cell SC, which is a more mild form of sickle cell and not the sickle cell SS strand. But I definitely still have crises. I still have to be thoughtful about my diet, thoughtful about my water intake. And the response that I got was basically like them explaining to me about the genetic percentages of my child having sickle cell, which I already knew about. But it wasn't really focused on any kind of impact that sickle cell could have on me. They basically were like, the room that you deliver in might have to be a little bit warmer than normal, but other than that, we don't anticipate any complications. So it was like, okay. And now I would say the biggest tool that I am using right now is finding the right care team and really focusing on putting together the right care team. So calling different doctors, calling different specialists, calling different hospitals to see, which hospitals and doctors and practitioners have experiences with successful deliveries of high-risk pregnancies. And that's really the main tool that I'm using right now, is using my resources, getting recommendations from other women who have had high-risk pregnancies and delivered babies in this area, and just, basically doing informational interviews with doctors to find out, like, okay, who's going to be the best fit for me and my family.
Absolutely. So what encouraging word can you leave with our listeners, those who are on this journey or trying to conceive?
I would say to the listeners to definitely link up with a community of women who know what you have been to, birthing persons who know what you're going through, whether that be the Sisters in Loss community or another community that you connect with at a hospital or on Facebook or Instagram. Definitely connect. It will bring you inspiration when you didn't even know you needed it. It will bring you comfort and just the beauty of knowing that there's strength in being together. What I will also say is ride the wave. Grief really does come in waves. You will be totally great one day, and then you will walk outside, or if you're like me, you're just walking down the hall in the school building and an unexpected trigger you will see or hear, and the wave of grief comes over you and it feels like you're drowning in it and that it's not going to go away. Continue to ride the wave and it will get smaller.
Yes, I love that. Well, thank you so much, JaRonda, for being on the podcast. Where can our listeners connect with you after this episode and learn more about the work that you're doing, but also get your book?
Awesome. They can connect with me on Facebook or Instagram at When the Heartbeat Stops. They can buy the book on Amazon, or if they want a signed copy, they can get it from whentheheartbeatstops.com. And I am also JaRonda Dockett on Facebook and Instagram. I would just love to connect with listeners and, again, continue the conversation about miscarriage and loss.
Absolutely. I love this interview, and I know that the listeners will be blessed by your story and definitely by your book. Thank you so much again, JaRonda, for sharing your story and your light with us.
Thank you for having me, Erica. And thank you for sharing and creating this platform for sisters around the world to share their stories and be encouragement to each other in this time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. There are so many ways to connect with the Sisters in Loss community. Join our monthly support group, our Sisters in Loss Healing Collective at sistersinlosshealing.com. Join our free Facebook group at sistersinloss.com/community, or text Sisters to 797979 to download your free Journal to Healing ebook. That is Sisters to 797979 to download your free Journal to Healing ebook. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sisters in Loss, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yeah, girl, we on YouTube at Sisters in Loss TV. We love you for listening. Keep the faith. Until next time, this is Erica, and I'll talk to you soon.